Everybody. It is day 4 of a week of Wonder Women around the world. My name is Paula. I've been hosting this series all week, and I was joking with Ria, who many of you have seen on the invites and the updates and all of the social media posts, and we were talking about it, going, do we create this every year just for us? Because I feel like I get so much out of this week. I had to take a beat and make sure that this still has the altruistic nature that it started with. But I've certainly gotten a lot out of it. Today, I'm really excited. We have two panelists, Jackie and Jess. They both represent two different parts of a digital conversation, which is interesting. Both leaders in their own right, both with really cool stories, and both have lived in multiple countries. So in keeping up with our spirit of diversity of thought all week, various experiences, various, foods, cultures, ways of living, all of these things shape who we are and ultimately contribute to what our ultimate, leadership style turns out to be. So this week has been all about different paths to getting to the top, and I'm excited about talking to you guys today about your paths. So let's get started. And like I always say to everybody, we can see what's on LinkedIn, but it's the woman behind, the tagline that we're interested in getting to know today. So Jackie, I'm going to start with you. Please introduce yourself. You've been very active. Many of the UiPath MVPs that'll be watching this will recognize you by name. I know you've done several events with Wonderbots in the past. Tell us a little bit about what you don't see on LinkedIn, and we'll get started there.
Awesome. Thank you so much for the opportunity, Paula, and thank you everybody for joining. It's lovely to see the turnout. It's incredible, connecting with women across the world and sharing stories. As Paula mentioned, my name is Jackie Muller. I am currently residing in Johannesburg, South Africa. We had a bit of a joke, before the call started about what that looks like. I currently am the industry coordinator at Belgium Campus ITversity here in South Africa. Also UiPath Most Valued Professional, as Paul had mentioned, for the last 5 years, so quite well affiliated with them. I also do some consulting work on the side. We've got a few businesses that revolve around productizing different elements of what businesses require. And I've recently also come to learn quite a bit about the property management space. So, it's quite diverse. I think one of the things Paul and I connect on many levels is that we're always keen to learn and share knowledge and, kind of spread our wings into different phases. Alongside all of this, I'm also busy doing my PhD at Northwest University, so quite a lot going on at the moment. And what you wouldn't see on LinkedIn is that I have 6 beautiful Dachshunds, little sausage dogs at home. And they literally own my heart. So that's probably something not many people know about me. But once again, thank you, Paula, for inviting me and having me be here.
Thank you so much. So we have a slew of dog moms on today as well then.
Brilliant.
Because Jess is certainly a dog mom too. So Jess, I'll turn it over to you. It looks like your thing's on mute too. So let's make sure we get that before you. But wanted to ask you, what do people not see, necessarily when they look at your LinkedIn profile? Tell us a little bit about yourself, where you live, and I'm really excited that you're here today.
Thanks for having me, and good morning, good afternoon, wherever everyone is. I like to think of my name's Jessica. Hi, good morning. I like to think of myself as a builder. I really like creating, whether it's like a product, a team, or strategies. I was actually, you can tell probably from my name, but I was born and raised in Belgium. And when I turned 26, I took a pretty big leap and I moved to the US with basically with 2 suitcases for what was supposed to be a 1-year project. And that was 12 years ago. So I started in product management, and I've spent roughly 15 years really focused on innovation, go-to-market strategies. And then about a year ago, as Paula mentioned, I kind of took on a new adventure, leading our communications, digital marketing, and our e-commerce team. I've lived in different places, but right now I'm living in Philadelphia with my husband and my 2 dogs. And I really enjoy traveling, cooking, working out, and reading. And I think it's a really nice balance with all the crazy world and the crazy, work pace to keep me grounded.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I'm so excited. 2 fantastic women leaders, super fun too, grounded. This is going to be a good one. So the historian in me always likes to ask where we started and where we are. And so I think it's really important when we tell these stories. A lot of people see just snapshots, right? They see, I don't know, Mel Robbins, or somebody that they might admire. There's a few folks mentioned along the way. You see a snapshot and a quote, or maybe a piece of a video. But it's hard to really understand or empathize or think through, how did they get there? What were the milestones, right? Unless you read the autobiography or tune into the podcast every week, you're not going to get the context. So I think it's really important, especially since we socialize these recordings and this webinar and this series, to early career professionals, some of the mentor programs that come up with some of our partners, and we really do that in the spirit of giving them context and some direction on not all, roads point to the same place, and you can kind of meander your way to find what that outcome is. So I'd like to talk a little bit about kind of where you started. What did you think? What did you want to be when you grow up? What were you saying as kind of a little kid versus maybe what you studied, and ultimately where you are? And Jess, I'll start with you on this one.
What did I want to be when I grew up? I actually wanted to be a doctor when I grew up. But then I've always enjoyed doing a lot of different things. So I went for a more broader study. So I studied business and strategy. And as I mentioned, I started my career in product management about 15 years ago, which is bringing new products to market, shaping innovation, leading go-to-market. But I think what's been clear throughout my career is that you can project where you want to go, but it's probably not where you'll end up. And I think it's the fun part about it. If you really embrace opportunities that kind of like come your way, and just be open to new adventures. I think where my career is right now, it's about making choices. I didn't come up with it. It's a Michael Porter strategy statement, right? Like, strategy is about making choices, and I really try to live by that. So really trying to put the right resources and the right people behind the choices. And in my current role, which was actually a newly created role, a newly created team, which I've always really enjoyed, is like challenging how we do things and coming up with new ideas, and really focusing on strategy. So where we play, how we're going to win, and how we build a future-focused team. So it's been a pretty big evolution. I've learned a lot, and I really keep learning every day, whether that's from my team, from my peers, or like more, from podcasts and books.
Awesome. No, I think that's so great. And the other thing too is that it doesn't necessarily have to be linear, but usually when things present themselves, it's meant to be. So why not explore it? I think that's awesome. All right, Miss Jackie. So you are definitely not even linear on where you are now. My first question, whenever I see Jackie for the first time, if it's been over a month, the first question I have to ask is, where do you currently live? To just give you a little context on the nomadic nature of this Wonder Woman. So Jackie, tell us a little bit about, what did little Jackie think she wanted to be when she grew up versus where you are and where you're headed. Give us a little context on your path.
So it's actually quite an interesting one, because when I was in high school, I actually wanted to become a professional softball player. So softball wasn't a huge sport here in South Africa, but we did have quite a league going. And to kind of pursue my career further, I actually wanted to go study politics, because one of the universities here that offered politics as a degree was one of those that, they had the best coaches for softball and so on. That ended up not happening. I ended up entering a competition with Northwest University and got a bursary to study IT. So I very quickly pivoted from the idea of, doing softball as a full-time career, thinking I'd be able to balance it out. And that's how I landed in IT. I built websites. I think that's primarily where I started. Did quite a lot of custom dev, kind of did the hardcore coding. And then decided I wanted to switch to data. Fell in love with data. Absolutely enjoyed some of the projects that they were. I think I was very fortunate enough at a very early point in my career to have been exposed to really big projects. So that was a great deal of fun. I think one of my big stand-up projects that I worked on was Tour de France. We did the analytics behind Tour de France, which was incredible. And then just as my data career took off, RPA became a thing in South Africa. And we joke about South Africa being about 3 years behind the rest of the world. So by this time, it was already old news in different parts of the world, but we were picking it up for the first time. And I think that was where I completely fell in love with automation. So I went into automation. I went to work in our internal COE for automation at NTT. Dimension Data, which then, was bought over by NTT. So we became the global center for automation. Spent a few years there being the automation architect, and then moved over into the client-facing role also inside of NTT, where we kind of built the automation business up from scratch. So I had amazing, amazing female mentors who really did teach me how to, look after a team, how to build a business, how to, kind of bridge that techie and business gap, because obviously I had a really strong technical background, and now to kind of, migrate into the business side of things, that's a really difficult switch to make. So I think if it wasn't for that, I probably wouldn't be an entrepreneur today. I learned a lot about, kind of what that looked like. And then while I was busy with NTT, I decided that I was going to give back a little bit to Northwest University and do some lecturing for them on the side. But it was kind of my own punishment, because I had very strong opinions about, how education works and, curriculums and kind of, what the state of those were. And I remember my now boss as well, back then had said to me, cool, well, if you have such a strong opinion about it, why don't you come do something about it? So I did. I took up the challenge. I did some temporary lecturing, and my goal was always to finish my studies so that I could go back and retire at Northwest University as a lecturer. Well, that came far too early for me. I think probably about a year and a bit ago, I was poached over to go give class full time at Northwest University, and I kind of was faced with this fork in the road, because this was going to be my retirement job. It's way too early to retire now, so what am I going to do? How am I going to stay busy? And it came at the perfect time. So I ended up making the transition into the academic space full time, opened up my businesses, kind of one for one, they started lining up. As you see an opportunity and, you see how something's done and you realize you can do it better, you kind of jump on the bandwagon. So that was kind of, how some of the businesses started picking up. And then I was fortunate enough to get the opportunity with Belgium Capital. Paula, you and I have spoken about a little bit. They're part of the UXI group, which, kind of ramps up our exposure into Africa a lot more. So the work that we're doing, locally, we get to kind of expand that and, kind of do a lot more outreach, a lot more knowledge sharing to a much bigger audience. So yeah, that's kind of my journey. In between all of this, somewhere along the line, I was recognized as UI Parts MVP. That was a great deal of fun, which also has kind of muddied the waters quite a lot, but it's been a great journey. Where we're going, I have no idea, but we'll see where the next travel takes us in a few weeks' time.
Fantastic. Well, yeah, I mean, if your retirement plans are happening a little bit earlier, I'm sure the whole order of operations will be switching up. So Jess, you have kind of the opposite experience, a trained businesswoman with a strategic brain. She's always the first one to ask us for like the Venmo and sets all of our bills straight after, the girls go out for a night. Jess just has that, that business mindset, I think innately, but also, through studies too. And you're now being put in the position to have to think digitally, and think with kind of a new mindset, which a lot of business leaders are being tasked with now in this age of agentic AI. So tell us a little bit about how, when something comes up and, you have to learn it and you have to absorb it, how do you take those challenges on? And, what do you communicate to your teams? How do you work together? What does that look like when something is new to everybody, including the leader?
Yeah, I feel like that's been my day-to-day for the last year, is like every day there's something new. I think I'm just naturally very curious. Paula, you know that about me too. Like I'll always have a million questions when people, whether, they talk to me about something new, or something I already know about. I'm just really curious to learn, and that's how I learn, is by asking questions. You're right, I'm very organized. I think it's part of the strategy mindset, but I think what I really like about myself is like I can balance the analytical with the creative, which has been really helpful. In the past, I've mainly, I guess, leaned on the strategy and the analytical part, but in this new role where I'm handling communications and digital marketing, like the creative part of my brain comes out, and I've really enjoyed it. I think overall, I really try to push my teams to think outside of the box with everything, and I challenge them to be more inquisitive too, which sometimes fires back at me when I ask them to do things. But then I also really think it's important to keep data at the center, whether that's digital marketing or communication, to really make sure that we're making smart decisions. So when it comes to digital marketing, it's really been a journey. I've tried, taking courses, learning from other people, speaking to agencies, to vendors, to really understand what we should be focusing on and what's going to have the biggest return on investment for my team. Because this is such an interesting space where everything is changing constantly. So there's not even like an easy course to go to, right? Because by the time you sign up for the seminar, it's something new has come up. So I think it's really interesting. I think the biggest challenge is to focus on fewer, bigger things and really trying to walk before we can run when it comes to digital marketing.
That's awesome. No, I definitely think that's the case. And the other thing too is just there's a balance between the change management, because you don't want to completely disrupt, your team's mindset and thinking and productivity, but at the same time, trying to iteratively infuse these new ideas and like, hey, the shortest distance between these 2 points is actually this. Why don't we try that, right? And but slow and steady. And I'm seeing that too. And we are, we do this all day, every day for, our companies, and even asking the questions and wait, help me understand why you do it that way, and kind of uncovering it. It's like, oh, okay, hold on. All right, let's not move that yet, but let's move the goalpost here. And it's a mindset, and even in understanding AI, which is a challenge in and of itself for a lot of business leaders. The application of it and its potential implications is the part that I think, everybody's kind of grappling with is what is that going to look like at scale? How do we manage this at scale? And are we going to get, to Jess's point, the data that we need so that we're not making instinctive or gut check or emotional decisions about this change, right? That it's really based on facts. I totally love that you both kind of go there, with the digital mindset too, because Jackie's always been very slow and steady with clients too. And I would always be kind of more, okay, come on, but you're going to be left behind. Somebody's going to buy you. That was my mindset always when I was talking to clients. And Jackie is very much, walk and look, we're still 10 years later, still talking about AI adoption. So I think there was some truth to slow and steady on that too. So one of the things I think that comes up typically when I'm mentoring people or working with a mentee or somebody growing or an intern, we have an intern coming into marketing this summer. Some of the questions, that they ask is, how do you learn? Like, where do you get your information? Like, what is your hack for, staying up with news, current events, trends in marketing, or whatever your, area of expertise is? But how do you stay up to speed? And like, actionable tips on kind of where it is that you conjure that up. And we've had some really, really great stuff. We're gonna have to go back to the transcript when we launch all of these videos, because so many nuggets were shared. I couldn't keep jotting them down the whole time. My head was like down half the time, taking notes. So some of the things that you guys do, and Jess sends a whole bunch of stuff. Jackie, I know you're posting a whole bunch of stuff. So tell us a little bit about that. How is it that you stay up to speed? How do you get your knowledge? How do you make sure that you're continuously learning and evolving? And Jackie, we'll start with you.
Awesome. Thank you. So it's an interesting one, because I think probably about 4 years ago, I was faced with the same dilemma of, not feeling challenged enough, or, kind of getting stuck in the same thing. And one of my mentors actually said to me, well, if you're in a room where you're not learning from somebody, are you in the right room? And that very much, struck true. And I think it's easy for us to kind of get bored and, want to pivot sometimes and not necessarily see the learning opportunities. But I think on the other side of the coin, it's also, true that there is a lot to keep up with, especially with AI. I mean, if we just take AI off the table and we go back to, 2 years ago this time, the world looked different. If we just match up some of the technologies we do business with, just keeping up to date with what they offer. We're not even talking about costing. We're not talking about licensing. We're not talking about pricing. We're just talking about the products. That alone was a challenge. And I think very quickly, the bigger vendors started to, create these release wave notes, which became monumentally helpful. So being able to, have sites that you can control once a month just to see, what the updates are, what's changed, that helps with the conversations we have with clients. I think having now moved into a space where we have AI, it's become a lot easier because you can actually set up agents to give you that information on the fly. And you can kind of train an agent to say, this is what I want to see, this is what I don't want to see. You can also build in certain factors to say, based on the current global well, it's not even a pandemic anymore. I think we're far past 5 years of a pandemic. But if you look at what's happening with the oil at the moment, that very much is something we want to know about. How does that impact, our ability to learn? Because these outside factors are very much, influencing how quickly we have to learn about, the kinds of businesses we're working with. I think if I had to give people, a few nuggets of knowledge or a few places to learn from a technical perspective, there's no shortage of blogs. If there's a specific technology stack you're looking at working with, or there's certain things you want to know, it's quite easy to find resources online. On the Microsoft Learn platforms, it's free. If you look at UiPath, their academy is free. If you look at AWS or Google, they've got their equivalent. So keeping up to date with technology, I think, is no longer a problem. I think how we take all of that information and consume it has become our problem. And for that, I do want to challenge the people on the call to, take a look at how you're using AI and build an agent to do this for you. You don't need to know how to code to do this. You don't even need to buy a license in some cases. You can build a custom agent off of ChatGPT or Copilot or, whatever technology stack you're using. So I think if there's something specific you want to learn about, and even if there's a few tracks you want to build out for yourself, that's definitely a good place to start. You're on mute.
I've done that twice this week. So Jess, back to you. So what are some of the places that you keep up to speed? I know, this last year, probably more so than ever, you're diving into, more digital and AI, type of literature and some of the questions and things you're talking about. But in general, how do you keep up to date? What is it that you do to continuously grow?
Yeah, I mean, Jackie's so right. Like from the technical perspective, I can only imagine how much there is to learn. I'm on the business side, right? So for me, it's evaluating different softwares, different vendors, different agencies, and honestly, it's a combination. I listen to podcasts. Like I like LinkedIn Learning. There's a lot of like cool like micro learnings on there that do a customized learning path depending on if you know where you want to go or what skills you're trying to strengthen. And then just talking to people, like I mentioned earlier, I love asking questions and it's how I learn. And talking to the experts, if you see something, you're like, oh, that's cool. I wonder how they do that. Like, there's always ways to optimize. Like my team knows this too. I was like, I always say like there has to be a better way to do this, and there often is. We just don't know what it is because there's so many options out there. So I think videos. I really like the HubSpot Academy. That one's really good. We're pretty new to HubSpot, so learning there, and then just again talking to my network and to peers has been really helpful.
Awesome. No, I think that's true. And that's something important. And a reason for these communities is to meet other people that you can then go and ask the question of. There was a person that did moderating, in a women's group that I was in New York, which is ultimately what gave me this idea, to do something like this post-pandemic. Once we started doing webinars, it was like, oh, okay, moderating is just kind of like asking a question, like getting somebody to tell a story. Like I can do that, like, and never would have thought that. And now we have, monthly webinars, part of our demand gen strategy and things like that. But I only learned it from somebody saying I'm a professional moderator. I didn't even know that was a job. So learning from different people and showing up to things like this, you see kind of, different areas. And I think that's fantastic. One of the things that I'm always curious of is the inspiration, or a mentor or a guide that may have influenced your life at some point. So I want to ask you both, and Jackie, we'll start with you on that. But is there somebody that you can call on or name, and if it's a book, it's a book, but something that you call kind of inspiration that sort of shaped some of the value systems that you emit today?
I think the first, I mean, there's obviously a few people that stand out, but I think the first one is probably going to be Andrew Adamson. He used to be my boss at NCT when I worked internally. And I think that was really where I started to learn a lot about leadership, how you deal with people. People management isn't easy. When you're growing a business and you start to rely on people, motivating people to see your vision and to kind of build towards, something greater. It takes talent. It's a very special kind of person who can manage people. And I think being able to kind of teach people how to manage people, but also technology is something that is becoming far more difficult to find. And I think considering where we're headed towards, in the next few years, where the projection or the prediction definitely is that we're going to have more augmented workforces, I think this is going to become increasingly more important. So I think about the lessons that I pull from him, and also Rihanna Cook. I think she was also a great inspiration. She taught me quite a lot about, how you lead with excellence. How do you kind of look from the balcony, over the business? When do you go into the weeds, and when do you look, at the business from the balcony? And it's an important distinction to make, because I think there's a lot of businesses that have suffered because, they're too deep into the weeds. They're too deep into the detail to be able to make strategic decisions. So I think there's a lot of people that I can call out, but at the moment, those are my two standout people.
Fantastic. Thank you. All right, Miss Jess, how about you?
I like, Jackie, that you brought up people management, because for me that was one of the biggest because accelerators are like pain points at the same time. Because no one can really teach you. You can learn some basic things about people management, but to your point, it's a very some people are just naturally born to be, leaders and people leaders. I have a few people as well that I've really learned a lot from and really admire. One is my current manager. I won't call her out because I don't want to embarrass her, but she's been really great in terms of like thinking strategically and but also the people element. Like she's a very people-centric leader and really tries to bring the best out in everyone. And then the second one is our currently our North America president. So he's very strategic mindset. So talking about having a clear vision and then rallying people behind it. A few years ago, he developed like a vivid vision, which was our 3-year plan. He wrote a whole document of like, this is where every function will be, but then like really getting everyone to rally behind it and like work towards that shared vision. I think is very inspirational. And I try to do the same thing with my team. I think people management is one of the hardest things there is. As a company, we went through this Trust and Inspire learning. It's a book by Stephen Covey. And it's really interesting how to go from command and control, which is a lot of people's default, right? Like do it this, like trying to control the situation, to really setting a clear vision and clear expectations for your team, and then really trusting them that they will find their way to execute. So I think that's been a really powerful growth moment for me.
Awesome. Well, and Jess, you have a unique experience too, having been with the same company for quite a few years. That's not as much the trend anymore. Could you share a little experience about that? Just the progression of growing within a company. We see that less and less today, but I think it still holds true. So I'd love to hear a little bit about how your career progression, how you navigated there, because if the people that you're working with inspire you, that says a lot about your organization.
Yeah, so I work for everyone's favorite like bakery ingredients company. We make like chocolate chips and sourdough, pure B2B. It's a Belgian company, so that's how I ended up in the US. As I mentioned earlier, it was supposed to be a 1-year project, and then I was going to go back to Belgium. But I really, first of all, I like the United States, and I really like the company. So 12 years later, I've taken on different roles within product management, starting in our chocolate category, which is still my favorite, and then kind of like taking on different business units and increasingly more responsibility, and then eventually people management. So I've had I guess, the privilege of learning gradually and taking on gradually more responsibility. And I think building my confidence came with that, like feeling empowered to speak up, to stick to your decisions. And I think I really love my my company, so otherwise I wouldn't have stayed there for 12 years. And I think it's really nice to get the opportunities and to have the leadership that empowers you to really live up to your true potential, and then see that potential and really put you in different roles that might feel very uncomfortable at first, like the role I'm in right now. I've always had a passion for digital and communications. I'm not traditionally trained on it. As you mentioned, I have a business background, so I think the fact that people believe in you and see the potential is something that I feel, really fortunate for, but I also try to, I guess, pay it forward and really try to see the grains of growth and like the really the building on my team's strengths and growing them that way.
Absolutely. And seeing that you have to pass on that culture too, because if they saw that in you, that's kind of, what's keeping that, that brand identity going. And that's fantastic to see. I love that. Some of the things too that have been coming up this week is the difference between balance and harmony. And I think that kind of lends itself to kind of a good segue here too. Is always the question was, well, what does work-life balance look like? And how do you balance? And we've sort of evolved a little bit to say, well, it's never quite balanced, but we certainly can find harmony, or at least some moments of peace and quiet, within the chaos. So I want to ask each of you, how with the demands, that you've clearly explained that each of you have in your day-to-day lives, as a professional, how do you find harmony? What are some of the tactics or some of the hobbies or some of the things that you do, to find that harmony and kind of keep the mind quiet and at peace, despite, the challenges that come with leadership? And Jess, I'll start with you on this one.
Working from home has been definitely a change, I think, to everyone's lifestyle and how you jump on business calls. I think for me, how I stay in harmony, right? To your point, instead of balance, is I'm really organized, so that like helps me prioritize my energy when it's whether it's at work or outside of it. And then I think I've just shifted a little bit of my mindset to like what could go wrong to like what's the best that can happen. And it really is like a simple switch, but it has a really big, profound impact on your day-to-day. So I really try to not work on the weekends. My team knows that as well. I really don't want them to work on the weekends. We can reshuffle, we can automate certain tasks, right, so that they have time. I want them to do interesting work, right? Like we don't want to do manual, repetitive work. So I think setting clear boundaries for work-life balance, and then kind of like leading by example for my team has been the biggest one. I mentioned earlier, I love traveling, I love cooking, I love working out. So all of these things really kind of force me to take my mind off work, even though, and say when you enjoy what you do, you're not really working. It's still important to switch off now and then.
Totally agree. No, and I think that's a good point of leading by example. Somebody recently said too that they make sure to put on Slack, like that they're, going to work out or whatever, with this kind of work from home thing, but just being honest about it, transparent, and weekends being sacred or days off. If it says out of office, like I'm not going to answer, and then, unless there's emergencies or however the things go, but I think that's important. If you lead by example, then employees are going to be more, inclined to be, honest, transparent. I need time off, and then truly get the rest that they need to come back fully productive and efficient and optimized, right? Because they can't do much if they're drained as well. And Jackie, how about you? What are some of the things that you do, to avoid jet lag, fatigue of air? I mean, she makes me look like I never leave home, and people think I travel a lot. So, Jackie, how do you find harmony in all the elements that you're balancing, including your pups that I now know about? Like, what do they do? How do you balance with them? I'm dying to know. How does she do it?
I was so optimistic for that question until you brought up balance, because I am the wrong person to ask about balance.
Well, that's a good and honest answer too.
Yeah, so I don't have a routine. I think it's very difficult for me to maintain a routine, because as soon as I get started, it's like, oh, right, we're getting onto a 14-hour flight. There's no routine there. I think what I have started doing, which, has helped me a lot, is the time that I do spend home, I want to spend with my family, my friends, my loved ones, and I want to be able to be somewhat present. I know that's very difficult, in many cases, especially when life goes on and, when you get off a plane, there's still, 1,000 tasks waiting for you. But I think something I've done that has helped me a lot, specifically with anxiety and stress, because I think something that really does get to us, and I think it's becoming a much more reoccurring problem, specifically if I look at the people, around me. Sleep has become a very deprived and very disturbed, occurrence. Something that's so important to the human body has now become a really big issue. So I find more and more that people actually battle with this, and I was one of those people too. And one of the pieces of advice that we actually got is, the Well, firstly, the thing that causes the stress, or the thing that causes the sleep deprivation, is the stress and the anxiety. You always feel there's somebody who needs a response. There's a message that's waiting for you, there's an email that's waiting for you, and it's because we know it exists. So when you get notifications about emails and messages that have gone unanswered, it stresses you out. So something I've become good and bad at is, I think, at any given moment, let's just check quick, 47 unread WhatsApp messages just from today. So, when you put your Teams notifications off, you put your email notifications off, those kinds of things, it helps you maintain that balance. So what I do is I put time aside to actually go deal with, the things that people need. And if it's urgent, they can reach me on WhatsApp. And, that's kind of how it goes. But it also helps to separate things out. So, having to work, and I know not everybody's fortunate enough to do that, but it is something to consider. Have a device that is specifically allocated to work. Put your WhatsApp on there that is specifically dedicated to work. It helps a lot with the balance. When I come home and I want to spend time with my dogs, I don't want to be answering messages in between. It still happens from time to time, but I think that's kind of the other thing you were touching on. When it comes to harmony, I think the only thing that's balanced in my life is the chaos, because when I get home and there's 6 dogs, it's chaos. So harmonizing the chaos has become something that I think I've gotten a lot better at over the last few years.
Well, I think the 3 ring circus, being able to stand on the ball and juggle and do all the things, that is balance still, even if it's a whole bunch of stuff going on, right?
Exactly.
So I don't think there's one way to look at it. It's very impressive. So the other thing, as far as, and I don't know, again, balance versus harmony, how that goes. But another thing that I think stood out of what you said is physically separating, whether it's the phone or the notifications. My husband, I drive him nuts because he's like, I said, you're responding to a text from 10 hours ago. And I'm like, yeah, I had do not disturb on, like I have no notification. So I open it up, if I don't put my readers on, like, I don't see what time it got sent. I'm just responding, right? So it's like, did you need milk? No, thanks. And there's milk in the fridge, right? So the physical separation, I think, is so important. And I'm one of those people that can't use a device. I know some people have their Apple Watch or their thingy that tells them what they're doing all day. That would make me more neurotic than imaginable, to see that constant notification. I just, it's not for me, right? So the separation of some of those things I think is important too, because sometimes the physical helps us kind of then detach mentally too. So both of you, have different ways of kind of zoning out, like what you do to kind of check out, and Jess, I know that, wellness, cooking, traveling, some of those things, are super important. So when you're looking at your, year, planning your year ahead or planning your next month, how do you interject? What's the cadence of interjecting the time that you need off, the time that you need, to yourself, the yoga classes that you sign up for? Is it kind of a holistic view of everything? Just tactically, how is it that you approach scheduling in all of these elements that, are requirements really? Like they're like non-negotiables for you.
It's evolved. I think I read somewhere on Instagram, not in a book, like plan your fun first. Maybe others have seen it, and it kind of really resonated with me. Is like instead of trying to fit your vacations in between all your work trips and your meetings and your conferences and your deadlines, I'm like, what if I just like pick the vacations I want to have, like at least once a quarter, have a nice break, and then everything else will kind of like fit around it. So I really tried doing that this year. I really think when you're on vacation, you should really be off. So I like longer vacations. I wanted to mention earlier too, like when I come back from vacation, it's always so stressful because everyone's like, oh, I have this like massive pile of emails waiting for me. So what I've started doing, I've done it a few times now and it's worked so far, is when I come back, I take all my unread emails and I put them in a vacation folder. And then I'll check in with my boss and my direct reports. I was like, is there anything urgent that you need me to look at? And I'll do that. And everything else, the 500 emails, they'll be in my vacation folder. If someone needs me, I can go back to it. But at least like that anxiety of like the Sunday scaries like amplified when you come back from vacation, it's gone. Because I'm like, oftentimes people can like things kind of resolve themselves while you're out anyways. But I thought that was, I learned it from someone else at work, and it really, things always work out. I think, in other words, people will tell you, they'll WhatsApp you, they'll call you, or they'll email you again. So I think that's been really good. And then In terms of the wellness, the working out, I am not a morning person. I'm also not an evening person, so I haven't really figured it out. But at the end of the day, I really want to relax. I'm pretty much of an introvert as well. So during the week, I'm like, I just want to sit on the couch, watch my show, hang out with my dogs. So I found for me, I have to work out in the morning just to kind of like get it over with. And especially in Philadelphia, winter's been really rough. But the toughest part is really getting out of bed. Like once I'm in the car, I'm at the gym, I'm so happy. I come back home energized. I go to the office energized. So for anyone who is a morning person, I applaud you. I understand it. But I think some things you just have to like force because they'll have a really positive impact on your physical and your mental well-being as a result.
I love that. Yeah, and I definitely think the fitting it in where your cadence, where your energy is, to make sure that it's a non-negotiable. I've gone back and forth on when the best time to work out is, for different reasons, mental or whether it's a physical goal or whatever the thing is. So I think those do change as long as they get penciled in. One of the things I wanted to ask you, Jackie, is in setting up kind of who you are, your brand, what people see when they are, looking you up on LinkedIn, considering your business for one of their initiatives, or a student kind of popping in to see who Professor Jackie's going to be. How is it that you set your LinkedIn up? Could you give some tips on some of the things that are important to showcase, to potential employers, to potential, applications maybe for higher education, but that's definitely one of the first spots somebody's going to go when they're evaluating you. So I think that'd be a really good, piece of insight of some of the things that you do and some of the things that you recommend others include on their LinkedIn profiles.
Thank you for that, Paula. I think it's a good question. I think it's something I've been battling with a lot as well, because when you start to represent, multiple different businesses or brands, it becomes difficult to manage and, to kind of balance it equally. And I mean, I look at our bigger group as well that Belgium campus, belongs to. We've got Cycler, we've got Taekwondo, we've got quite a few different brands that exist within, this. It's essentially a house of brands that live together. And I mean, if you look at that alone, and then you start to look at some of the stuff that we do, external to that, we look at the affiliation with UiPath, we look at some of the stuff that we're doing, from a different skills development perspective. There's a lot of different associations that need to be considered. And one of the questions I get quite often is, what is it that you do? And my answer is always, I don't know. It depends on who you're asking. So which persona are you asking about? And it's interesting because creating a LinkedIn profile that, brings all of this together can get challenging. But I think what I've started to do is, I've specifically started to look at how do we take it a level up? And I think it's that balcony view that really helps. So what is it that you do as a person? What is it that you have to offer? And kind of break it down from there. So, as you start with my profile, you'll see a very generic, headline. And then as you go down into my bio, you'll start to see things like, what are the core categories that I kind of have invested time and energy into the last, let's say, 6 to 18 months. And then a little bit of a description around, what I've done in each of those categories. And then as you start to go deeper into my profile, you'll start to see things like, projects that I've worked on, what am I currently working on? And I think there's a lot to be said for adding the projects that you're working on, even if it's a side project. Because if you're looking at, trying to apply for a job, it is cool for people to see what your expertise are, even if it's not necessarily aligned to, a title that you have. If you've decided over the weekend you're going to go figure out, I don't know, this new recipe and, you want to see what this looks like. If it's something that you're doing that is a bigger part of what you're trying to achieve, pop that on there as a project. If you're starting the next, great master chef in your kitchen, put that on there. If you are looking at, learning how Copilot works and it's not necessarily part of your job because you're in HR, put that on there as well. I think there's a lot to be said for being able to identify what skills you have through projects and not necessarily skills that people add on LinkedIn. I think what makes LinkedIn difficult at the moment is when you do have a job that's being created, they do actually have, skills, the preferred skills that, a person should have. And I think that's difficult to balance because LinkedIn only lets you put 100 skills in. And I think any given person, whether they know it or not, has more than 100 skills in their basket. I think people are just very modest with what they're able to do. And I think one of the biggest things that I want to say, because for a long time, it was kind of drilled into me, and I think with good reason, being humble and modest is a very big thing. I think the world really does, take it out on you a little bit if you aren't. But you can definitely balance that with, kind of claiming and acknowledging the skills that you have. I think it starts there. You need to believe in yourself before you can try and get somebody to believe in you. I think another thing is, when you start to look at the skills that you want to start putting out onto LinkedIn, one of the big things is that, employees will, or employers, sorry, rather would look for, kind of proof that you do possess the skill. So doing a LinkedIn learning course, doing some form of something, a course is generally a good way to kind of sum it up. To show the skill that you've now put down is a really good place to add that onto LinkedIn as well. And then I think something that's really come to benefit me a lot as well, I get a lot of good feedback on this, is actually knowledge sharing. So if you're going to be writing LinkedIn articles and you're going to be doing contributions and those kinds of things, it's a really good thing to add to your profile. And this is actually something I want to latch onto one of the earlier questions we spoke about around, where do you go to learn and how do you kind of manage your learning journey? And one of the things that I think is actually quite relevant to add as well is, I think, probably very relevant to a lot of different industries, not necessarily, or different expertise, not necessarily just technical, is that you need to build your own toolbox. So often, we'll encounter something basic, when we start out, and, I think in the technical space, there'll be a script of some sort that you've written. And you'll find that in a few months' time, you might need that again. So instead of, going through the research again to try and find what you've done, build a little bit of a toolbox for yourself, a quick reference that you can go see, how you did it and kind of, what the thinking around that was. And when I started doing that, I actually started to create blog posts. And the blog posts are still serving me quite well at the moment, because if there's something I need to do, I can always just refer back. It's a quick Google search. I know where to find it, or I can go onto the blog directly and I can find it. And I'm not only just helping myself, I'm helping people out there as well. I'm a very, very big fan of contributing knowledge. So I think whatever knowledge you can contribute on LinkedIn, I think do that. I think people sometimes get intimidated, and I completely understand. Nobody wants, those massive 10-page CVs that are being handed in. But if you have content to justify 10 pages, I will read all 10 pages. So I also think people are sometimes scared, to put too much information in case, it scares somebody off. But I think this kind of also reiterates specifically on LinkedIn, and it's a message I give graduates quite a lot as they're kind of coming up and they're trying to get started. If there's a company that doesn't appreciate you for what you possess, you don't belong at that company. It's a two-way street in an interview, and I think sometimes people forget this. It's not just about if you are a good fit for a company, it's if a company is a good fit for you as well. So I think LinkedIn is quite similar. You will find the organization that suits you and your skill set and will appreciate you for what you have. And if they don't, and I know this is something we don't see a lot, but if they don't appreciate you, go find somebody who does. There's no shortage of work and opportunities in the world at the moment.
That's awesome. Thanks for that, Jackie. And Jess, I'm going to turn a question to you in a slightly variant of what we had talked about. But if you were looking back on little Jessica, who wanted to be a doctor one day, is there any advice, or is there anything that you'd tell your younger self with the information and the wisdom that you have today? Is there something that you'd look back on and say, or advice that you would share?
I think on the one side is knowing that it's okay to not know where you're going, and not have it all mapped out. As a strategist and like an analytical brain, it's a tough one, but I think just trusting, sounds so big, but like everything that's meant to be will happen, and just being open to things that come your way, people you meet, and being okay with not knowing where you're going to end up. But you can also build the skill set. I think if there's certain things that you want to grow, by building the skill set, you will get there. You can kind of like manifest certain opportunities. And then another little nugget of advice I would think is maybe go slow to go fast. Little Jess always, and even current Jess, wants to go pretty fast when it comes to learning new things, but it's equally important to pause and zoom out and slow down, so to make sure that you're focusing on the right things, and to then accelerate the business and your own personal growth.
Yeah, great advice. Great advice. And Jackie, how about you? If you had to look back on little Jackie and give some nugget of wisdom or something to look out for, what would that be?
I think life is going to be filled with chaos, and I think it's important for us to go look for the little moments that, show us that life really is worth living. I think it's easy for us to lose sight of what's around us and why we're doing this. I think, especially if you're, in a very busy environment, stop, look for the sunset, look for the sunrise if that's your kind of thing. If you're a morning person, go look for those moments that, just give you that sense of, wow, okay, this is actually what life is about. If you look for that more, I think we'll be more fulfilled. It won't, we won't be chasing one singular view of success. I think it looks different. And I think that's another message I'd probably give my younger self is, be kind to yourself. Success looks different for different people. Don't measure yourself against, an unachievable success. Your journey looks different.
That's awesome. And one last thing I'll add to the LinkedIn advice that has come up a couple of times to share with this audience, because I saw a few new faces, is two things. One is having recommendations. So every year, whether it's I worked really hard with a partner, or there was a salesperson that did really well, or somebody that I worked with internally, but either internal or external, do a recommendation exchange. It's good to keep those, up to date. And I have almost like 12 years of history of people, vouching for me. And regardless of whether people meet me or not, somebody else's words about me are always going to be impactful. Whether I'm looking for a job or just looking for credibility from a new client or looking for whatever the thing is that you're looking for, it doesn't matter. It's a good marker. And then the other one that that was brought up again that I always forget to mention is the brag book. And that is similar to what Jackie was saying about keeping track of all of her code snippets. The business equivalent and the modesty, but understanding the impact, right? Kind of measuring modesty and impact is what I call a brag book. And it's if a client said something, or if a award was won, or if you got a compliment on something, or a project sold, or a video, was the reason somebody said yes, or whatever the thing is. But keeping track of those moments. I wrote one down this morning. One of my folks said, "Thank you so much for teaching me, how to talk to salespeople, because I had a great conversation this morning and felt very confident." That went in my brag book today, because that's an example of a moment that leadership, without me teaching something, was learned by example, right? And so those are the things that I jot down to kind of on those down days or whatever you look at them, but also on the performance review days, you know exactly what you contributed. And as these ladies have mentioned, you have the data to back up what it is that you're claiming. Well, this has yet again been an amazing discussion. Jess and Jackie, thank you so much for joining and participating in this event. I'm sure everybody will be excited to connect with you guys, and we really appreciate the time you took out.
This is
Awesome.
fun.
Thank you so
Thank
much
you
for
so
having
much.
us.